Good morning, everyone. Morning. I was saying to someone, I said to my husband, ooh, I'm on day 2 of a Vegas conference. I wonder how many people are going to show up. So I'm really appreciative for everyone that came, lived your best lives last night, and showed up this morning. So thank you very much. My name is Dawn Sharifan. I lead the people team at a company called Slack Technology. I joined the company when we were about 150 people, which was a little over 4 years ago, which I like to joke is the longest 97 years of my life. We had about 150 people, 3 offices. We're in 3 countries. Now we're over 2,000 people, 12 offices in 9 countries, and that's just been in the last 4 years. So I'm tired, but I'm here with you today. And what I was hoping to talk to you about, and really would love for this to be a conversation, is what is isolation and loneliness at work? And this is becoming a little bit more of the topic du jour, but I didn't really know that when I started getting curious about it. And what I was really starting to realize is, as I grew into the most senior role of my career, wow, management's really super lonely. So let's jump into that. So when people think about isolation and loneliness, they might think about this guy or this woman. This one I thought was particularly depressing, with a little teddy bear, right? So, and I feel like I want to have the Sarah McLachlan music playing in the background, right? It's really sad, right? But really, when we talk about loneliness, we're talking about a lack of quality relationships, okay? Someone who's a hermit could not be lonely at all, right? It's really about what is the feeling and impact of that. So my question to you is, what about this woman? Does she look lonely? Does she look isolated? I had the best job of my life. I had an amazing leadership team. I had great team, great community. I didn't feel lonely. All I did was talk to people all day long, right? To my detriment sometimes. But when I came home from work, I love me some Bravo TV. Any other Housewives fans out here that are brave enough to admit it? Thank you for your vulnerability. I know this is a very intellectual, we're a very meditative group. Oh, I was all about the Real Housewives. Talk to me about Nene. And I love me some Ben and Jerry's. And what I didn't realize, what those were my numbing techniques because I felt so alone and isolated, right? I was in a senior leadership position. How many of you work in people, HR? Yes, how lonely does that feel sometimes? We cannot talk about what we do most of the time during the day, right? I don't talk about my work when I'm at home. So my husband has to remind me, he's like, remember when that thing happened? I'm like, no, it's my compartmentalization, I don't remember anymore. He's like, no, but I heard you on the phone about the guy who did the thing. And I was like, oh yeah, I've just got so used to not talking about it with anybody. So I became really, and I didn't even realize it. I was numbing myself, my health was suffering, and I wasn't my best self as a leader. And so I started getting curious about this idea of, wow, senior leadership is really super lonely. And there's nobody that talks about it, and you're not supposed to talk about it, right? Because you're supposed to have everything figured out. Here's the tip that I learned as I grew really quickly with this fast-growing company. You think that the people at the top actually know what the hell they're doing? Nobody knows what the hell they're doing. And everybody feels just as isolated and lonely and afraid to talk about it. Okay? So what I'm hoping to do, and with this conversation, is maybe break the bubble on this a little bit. Is what happens if you say, I'm really lonely today. I'm really struggling with this thing. And I started doing some research. And this research came out, I think it was last year, by Cigna, U.S. healthcare company, that loneliness has the same effect on our mortality as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Anybody else feeling maybe good about themselves that they're not smoking? Right? That's kind of one of I'm okay, I don't exercise as much, but I don't smoke. No, but I'm isolating myself watching Bravo and eating Ben and Jerry's. Okay? There are 3 age groups that really start to really identify and over-identify with loneliness. The first are folks in their 20s. Who thinks maybe why do folks in their 20s maybe feel more lonely than other age groups? So social media, on their own for the first time. College. All their friends moved away, yeah. gosh, God, I don't miss my 20s. The 20s is being hard, right? So you're in this time where you're the first time you're away, perhaps. Perhaps you're moving across the country, you're leaving your family, your friend group. And also because of social media, we know this, right? But you start comparing yourselves to people in a very different way. And where you find your worth and where you find your value. So I mentioned this for folks that are bringing this back to the workforce. How many of you have a large portion of your workforce in their 20s? Yeah. So that is a key age group to watch. Okay, so they don't know who they are yet. They're figuring it out. They're away from their friends and family. They're comparing themselves to everyone else. And there's this idea that I should be better than or I should be advancing. They're running the race of everyone else. They haven't run their race yet. Right? Other age group, 50-year-olds, right? This is the second age group that reports a significant increase in loneliness. Anybody, I work in tech in San Francisco, so 50-year-olds is not maybe as much in our age group, which is creepy to say because I'm in my 40s. But how many of you have 50-year-olds in your workforce? Yes, yes. Why might somebody in their 50s start feeling isolated and alone? Divorce? Empty nest? Yes, right? What is my peer group? Absolutely. What else? Yeah. Exactly, that's so insightful, right? When you start to hit your 50s, you start to wonder, what is my purpose, right? Am I doing what I thought I would always do? Like the finite nature of time really starts to kick in. Absolutely. Also, there's some physical changes that start happening in your 50s. Women go through menopause, men go through andropause, and you maybe start feeling that you're not invincible. You might start having health issues, okay? The other category that I'm not speaking to here, but the third age group is folks in their 80s, okay? And maybe to me that seemed more obvious because I thought, oh, that's maybe who would be lonely, but folks in their 80s, right? So nearer to death, people, their friends and family are dying and passing away. We go from there, right? Yeah, please.
They're often launching their children and also taking, we encounter people in this age group, the 50s. They're often launching children into college and on their own, and they're also taking care of aging parents, and that's very stressful for them.
Totally. So sometimes it's called the sandwich generation, where you're caring for both your elders and your children at the same time. And again, remember, loneliness and isolation is not that you're not around people. You could be talking to people all day long. But the questions I would start to ask is, what is the quality of your relationship, and what does that look like? And are you in a caretaker role, to your point, or are you able to connect as peers? Okay? So now let's also just talk really quickly about the future of work, right? So we have email, text, artificial intelligence, remote work, even things like Slack. What does that do? I mean, not Slack specifically, but maybe it's something like Slack. Sorry, Stuart, if you're watching. So what might that do to the workforce, right? And we all are talking about, we think the future of work is more remote, more distributed. What might that do? So that's why I'm saying, like, let's get in front of this now and have a conversation as leaders and even humans, because maybe this is us in the coffee shop, right? So all of this feels very depressing. All of this feels very depressing to me, right? How are we going to get in front of it? So does anybody know what the cure is for isolation and loneliness? Meaningful relationships. How do you get to meaningful relationships? Boom! I don't know you, but you get the gold star. What is your name? Hi, Amy. Star student. Okay, so vulnerability, right? Vulnerability is how you get to meaningful relationship. How do you bring vulnerability into the workplace in a way that feels authentic and real, right? Okay. So, many of you, I'm sure, know Brene Brown. I was on this train before she had her Netflix special, but that's okay. When she showed up in wine country, I was like, maybe she's jumped the shark. I don't know. But vulnerability is the only bridge to build connection. Okay? So what I'd like to suggest and propose here is for those folks that are going to take maybe one thing that we talk about today back into your working relationships, It starts with us. It starts by recognizing that maybe we're isolated, maybe we're lonely, and what that might look like. Okay? So if you will go with me, let's do that a little bit, okay? So, I'd like for those of you that have a notebook, please draw a little square. If you don't have a notebook, you can imagine it in your mind. Nothing bigger than a regular size Post-it, okay? And this is an exercise taken from Brené's book, Dare to Lead. So if you have read it or you know it, you might be familiar with this exercise. And I'd like for you to take maybe just 2 minutes, and I'd like for you to write everybody's name who really matters to you. And it cannot be bigger than this piece of paper, okay? So remember, in your mind, it's like a regular size Post-it, okay? Everybody's name, the relationships that are truly meaningful to you in your life. Take 2 minutes. Write them all down. If you don't have a piece of paper, just think about them in your head. This is not front and back of the Post-it. It is just the front of the Post-it. Okay, and as we come back together, I'd like to ask you, of the people that you wrote on that piece of paper, are these the people that you're truly investing your primary relationships in? Are these the people that when you come home from work, when you come home to your spouse, are you spending your time with these people, or are you spending your time with other people in your mind? So maybe turn to the person next to you and just ask, are these the people you're prioritizing in your life? Yes or no? Actually introduce yourself, say your name. Okay, let's come back together for a second. I just want to point out, first of all, we've been giving standing ovations to everybody while we're here. I'd like to give a little standing ovation to this group. All I said was tell them if you're prioritizing your life, and the energy in this room just went up, and I was going to give you another prompt, but I didn't need to, right? So I'd love to hear someone who might be willing to share any insight or anything from that conversation that came up for you. Yes,
Hi, Dawn, I'm Chuck. My first thing was I kind of felt sad because I thought there'd be more people on the list. And then I realized, no, this is really who they are.
Did that come up for anybody else? Yeah, I see some nodding.
Yeah, I had the same reaction at first. I actually felt like all these people mean a lot to me, these like 6, and I really only spent time with 3 of them, so I'm kind of like split. Yeah.
So I'm writing names of people like that I call regular because and I'm struck by, do I even like them? I don't know. So thank you for bringing that up.
First of all, amen to that, right? How many people do we call or see their name pop up on our phone and we're like, ooh, that person?
Hi, good morning. I actually put myself on the list.
Oh, yes!
Because I feel like we become so busy that we don't take the time to self-care and to focus on like the things about ourselves that we either like or need to nurture or want to work on and self-improve so we can be present for the rest of the people on the list. So.
Love that. I saw another hand. Yeah.
Hi, my name's Kyle. I put people on that list that aren't actually here anymore, that are passed away. Because in my meditation practice, like I'll talk to them and say hello. And I think in the same way that people like I don't talk to were on that list who are here through that same practice. So just want to share that.
Thank you.
One thing, like I added someone to the list who I met last week, and I feel like is just an instant, like extreme positive connection.
One more over here.
Thank you. So the first thing I thought was, what is a meaningful relationship? And I really had to understand the connotation of the word. And so Jocelyn helped me, and she basically said, add value and less than rich without them. But immediately I thought, well, I have to add my mom and dad. But then I thought, are they really meaningful in that aspect? So definitely, thank you.
Thank you for that vulnerability. And what that comes up to me is like, there are people on that we put on our list sometimes that we think we're supposed to put on the list. Right? That happened for anybody else? Yeah. First of all, thank you for that, and thank you for everyone for sharing. I felt that energy in the room when you guys were talking. So the idea here is hopefully a little bit of aha, which I maybe heard a little in this room, but is if these are the people that truly matter, then how am I spending the rest of my time? And that is how when we have 300 Instagram or Facebook friends or so many connections on LinkedIn, and we have just an epidemic of loneliness. In the US, 3 out of 4 Americans report some level of loneliness. 1 out of 4 report significant levels of loneliness. Okay. So UC San Diego put together this study that said, yes, it's vulnerability, but also we believe that it's vulnerability plus wisdom, okay? So I can be vulnerable all the time, but what else could I be doing? And how else might I bring that back to my workplace? So the first part is compassion and caring, okay? So I think if you're at this conference, you probably are leading with a bit of compassion, but this idea of how are you connecting with people? One thing we do for my team meetings is we start every meeting with a check-in. And sometimes when I was first doing them, I was like, okay, these are going kind of long, like we do have some business to get to, right? So depending on the meeting and what we're doing, we might check in with 1 or 2 words. Sometimes we might check in with a bit of a longer check-in. But just 2 weeks ago, I was in my team meeting, we're doing our check-in, and sometimes they start off like, I'm good, fine. And somebody on the team said, I feel overwhelmed. And the next person said, I feel overwhelmed. And then we kind of went around, and I said, you know what, guys, I feel overwhelmed. And that shifted the entire conversation of what was going to be our staff meeting in a very different way. And so that is a tip that I offer for you. I wonder, is there anything that this community is doing that you do to build compassion or connection in your workplace? One here?
So top-down driven in our culture. We do what's called a MEPS check-in, not every time, but at least monthly. And we start with mental, and then we do emotional, physical, and spiritually. How do you feel mentally? How do you feel emotionally? How do you feel? And we make it a safe space. And I did one of those MEPS connections, and one of my employees broke down crying. And she'd worked for me for 3 years, and she said, I just want you to know that sometimes I don't show up as my best, and I know I've been struggling lately. And she said, I have bipolar disorder. And it was a safe space. She told me, we cried together, we worked through it, and we all, my other team member and I said, we're here for you. Whenever you need a break, let us know. It was just it's a wonderful opportunity for people to be authentic and real and be their true self in the workplace. We're everything, we have to bring our whole self to work.
So there's mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual. Check in on those dimensions. Anyone else do anything?
Hey, Brian. One of the things we do on our team on a weekly cadence, really every team meeting, is we've got kind of clear team values that we've kind of put together. But one of the things that we do is we reflect on the week previous and really kind of pick out someone who really showed up for you. So that might be someone who really exhibited one of the values of really communicating with, really making sure they communicate with impact, or someone who really showed up and they were selfless. Someone who really went out of their way to really bring value and add value to me. So we typically go around the room and do that and think about who really showed up for me. And sometimes we switch it up and it's around like, what am I thankful for? So it's a little bit of more of a personal switch. And that can go long some meetings, but it's really powerful.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And I'm reminded of the keynote. You guys are addicted to opioids, I think, maybe? Dopamine? Yeah. Anyone else has something they'd like to share?
Great. Something that we're starting to do, at least within our leadership team and then with our direct reports, is ending meetings or one-on-ones with a like and a wish. And a like can be something about work-related or not. And usually it's some good affirmations of like that you didn't know how you made an impact with someone. But then the other side of it is like a wish, which is more of like, I wish this was different or something, and follow up with the request, but it's supposed to be help strengthen bonds by making commitments to each other in that way.
Oh, yes.
So this is going to seem kind of cheesy, but we have a completely remote team, and we have Slack channels for different things. And I'm not saying that because of Slack, but I think that a lot of this actually comes out just through people making their own like stupid emoticons or GIFs or whatever. Like, I know that sounds really ridiculous, but that is a way that I think people feel very safe to express themselves whenever projects are going really crazy. And we have everything from unicorns like pooping out rainbows to, tacos for good things that we've done. So I think that this is a way that kind of opens the door for some of those discussions.
I'll pay you $20 for the Slack reference later. But I think that is true. And how many of you work either partially or fully with remote teams? Yes. And excuse me. And I think that even just checking in, like just a check-in, who showed up for you this week with your remote team, right? What does that look like? Everyone feels, especially if you're not fully remote, that they're missing out on something if they're not in headquarters. When I first started managing a large remote team, I had to put Slack bot reminders in my Slack channel to say, remember to say hello or good morning to this person, right? And it might be really silly, but we're busy. And then you don't realize, oh, shoot, I didn't say it's Wednesday and I haven't talked to that person in Canada or Dublin yet, right? So even just reminders, set systems for yourself, what that might look like, okay? Second piece of the UC San Diego research for wisdom is self-awareness or reflection. So I heard some of you talk about meditation. That is a way. Journaling is another way, right? How might you bring any sort of self-awareness into your workspace? We have a meditation group or team at Slack where people do meditate like during the lunch hour. There's some teams, I don't feel like I'm masterfully skilled at this yet, so I haven't done it, but I have some teams that will start meeting with a 1-minute meditation, just kind of anchor into the room. Sometimes I've done workshops where you reflect at the end, where it's like, hey, how did I show up? How did I want to show up? What was the gap? Right? So trying to mix the academic with the tactical for you here.
One thing I like is actually checking in about, similar to you said for your teams, what are you bringing to the room today? Because that really does change how people are going to interact or how we perceive someone's words.
We actually like to really practice mindful engagement and single task all the time in meetings, making sure that you're focused on one thing, no computers, no Slack messages during the meeting, focused on the people in front of you and listening intently.
Absolutely. I would have thought my team, I would have chopped their arms off when I said device-free meeting. And then when I really was serious about it, they were like, oh, this is different, right? We're so focused on creating the maximum amount of productivity that we're actually reducing and leaving productivity on the table. What actually comes up for me when you say that, I'm going to be vulnerable and share with you a little bit. The last couple of months, I've been getting a lot of feedback that I have RBF. Right? If you don't know what that means, that stands for resting blank face. And there's part of me that was like, well, let me take you through my journey. My first part was like, screw you. Like, don't face police me. Then the second part was like, okay, let me get a little bit curious about that and why might that be? And so part of it is the role in the box that I sit on the org chart, right? But part of it I realized is because I was showing up differently where my devices were down, I was fully present. I was really listening to someone. And people were so unused, not just for me, but for anybody, to really fully presently be listening to them. They were like, oh, you're judging me. I was like, no, I'm just listening to you, right? So we are so starved for that listening, that connection, that full presence, that sometimes you might even get some like weird feedback in the beginning. Like, ooh, what are you doing? That feels weird and uncomfortable, right? Okay, the other piece here is indecision. Lack of decisiveness blocks wisdom, okay? And the thing I want to tell us, to bring it back to our workplace is, how can we create more clarity for our teams, right? Always focusing on what is the goal, what is the objective, what are the deadlines, right? Especially in the fast-growing startup, we're running around sometimes like chicken with our heads cut off. We don't know. When does this due? I don't know, as soon as possible. Who's going to see it? I don't know, right? So how can you provide clarity, and how can you demand clarity from your teams and your leaders so you can bring that back to your teams? So put that together with vulnerability, then hopefully you're starting to cure loneliness and isolation at work. Okay, I think, let me just look at my next slide here. Okay, while we do this, I wasn't sure how many people were going to show up. Quite frankly, I'm pleased. I do have some handouts, so I'm going to hand them out really quickly. There's 2 pages each, so I'll hand them on the edge and hand them down, okay? Just 1 second. The top page is, oh, sure. Thank you. The top page is from the UC San Diego study to kind of self-assess how lonely you might be. The second page, remember there's 2 pages for each. 2 pages for each. That's all right, we can figure it out. And then the second page is, how can you express empathy and vulnerability? What is your level of awareness for how you do that, okay? So we'll have one sort of semantic, how do we hand this out kind of thing. I'll be right back with you. So those first questions are self-assessment for your own level of loneliness. Okay? Questions 1 through 10. UCSD. Yep. And I'm happy to, if a responsive wants to give you the deck that has all the links for all the study and research that I mentioned as well. And it's called the UCSD Wisdom Study. I was wondering that. I was like, this is very fancy paper. Only the best for y'all. Okay, so thank you so much. Thank you for the people that held it out. If anybody's missing a piece or page, let me know. Yes. Did you get it? Did you got it? Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, so just take, it's not a long test. It's not even a test, an assessment, right? And I'd like for you to specifically think about what comes up for you as you look through these questions. And you're not going to share these results with anybody else, not even the person sitting next to you. Okay, so once you've had a chance to do that, you do not have to share your results with the person next to you unless you want to. But turn to, if you can, maybe a different person this time, and share anything that might have come up, any aha, any insight, any awareness that you might have gotten through completing that. Okay, just take 2 minutes. Oh, yeah, okay, we'll come back to you. You're first on my list. Okay, you guys all get gold stars. The energy and volume, impressive in this room. Okay, now I'm going to ask, as we come back together, is there anybody that would like to share from their conversation? So anything that came up?
Actually, hi, I'm Morgan, for those who haven't met yet. Tell me your name again, sorry. Melissa and I were actually both sharing that we scored very low, like never, never, rarely, rarely, because we both work in roles where there's a lot of time and attention and people want to meet with you. So I was joking that I'm flying to Boston on Monday, so I have like a 6-hour maybe questionable Wi-Fi offline opportunity to be completely selfish and not have anyone asking for my time and catching up on stuff in complete isolation, and I'm so excited for that. So sometimes it's like you're overly needed or you have too many people asking for your time, and then you actually crave isolation. So she and I are both in the same boat, which was kind of the opposite. So.
And I would say to this point about self-reflection or self-care, I want to just really reemphasize this. Just because you're around people all day, just because you're talking to people all day, especially as people leaders, right? Watch out for that. That's why I'm hitting it for us, right? To focus on yourself. Because I was surprised. I would have never thought I was lonely. Never, ever. My God, could I please be more lonely? Like, leave me alone for a minute, right? And so it's like, start with ourselves, right? Anyone else? Yeah.
One of the things I found was wasn't even just work related for me. It was also, I have my wife and my kids that are at home as well, and I feel like spending 8 to 10 hours out of the day trying to push a change, being there for employees. It was the same type of demand at home as well. So it was all day, every day, just demanding of me. And there are times you do feel lonely, isolated, and you almost feel like, man, where are the people there for me as well? And so really just taking the time to, like you said, do some self-care, really take care of yourself emotionally and spiritually is important.
I felt something inside me when you said that. I want to just maybe ask the room. Anyone else ever feel like, where are the people that are there for me? I'm there for everyone else. Yeah, right? That resonates with me deeply. I'll tell you, I knew more about Nini's life than I knew about what happened in my husband's day. Yeah.
I had an epiphany, and it was that I feel lonely when I feel I'm going to be judged. And so it's that I do have people in my corner, but I feel lonely when I feel like I can't go to them, and it's in fear of being judged.
That feels powerful.
Hi, I'm David. So I made this about now versus 6 months ago because I was feeling it out sort of as an aggregate or an average, but then recognized that I'm feeling a lot better now than I did 6 months ago. And I think I was feeling very lonely 6 months ago. And I take the point on self-care, it's important. But what got me out of sort of my slump was focusing more on other people and taking time to help them with what they need help with. And it was not intuitive that would help me feel like I was accomplishing and feeling fulfilled. But what I ended up finding was I made more meaningful connections by serving them. And through that process, they felt like I was helping unfill their very full bucket. So they had more to give back. So I think an alternative sometimes, or a different way to look at it would be, and the same with my wife and my kids at home, I would drive to work during that period and say, it's not about me. It's not about me, and try to focus my energy on the other people. Anyway, that worked for me. So.
Thank you. I want to go back this slide for 1 second because I think I went quickly over something. This here is connection, but it's also of service. So how can we be of service to others? That can be parts of wisdom as well, right? So it is one thing, I tell my team sometimes, people come into our offices, we don't have offices, we're a workspace, but people come into our conference room or whatever, they emotionally vomit all over us. They feel better. We're now covered in their emotional vomit. right? So how do we make that about being of service in some way without just being the recipient of the vomit all day, right? Yeah. And then someone asked me a great question at the break. I want to just put it out because I think it'll be great for the room.
I work for a technology company, and so they're notoriously introverted or kind of closed down, don't talk a lot. And so I wondered how we could encourage them to talk about this subject and maybe get them to open up a little bit more to talk about isolation and loneliness so that we could then maybe have a conversation surrounding it and maybe help.
Yeah, that resonated with me. What I would say is, how many of you work for places that talk about bringing your authentic or full selves to work? Yeah. How many people feel like that could actually happen? So maybe some.
One of the things that I have found that works for me with the people that I serve is when I find that they're struggling to open up and sort of share that part of themselves, I dig a little deeper within myself. Because I typically can share quite a bit if I have to, right? But if I see someone struggling, I go deeper, right? I find something that I'm not really sharing with anyone just to show them that this is a safe space to be vulnerable. And I do that repeatedly and show them that every time we speak, which is once a month or, sometimes twice a month, I will always be the person who they can sort of open up to no matter what. And I will share that same level of authenticity. Yeah.
I love that. So sometimes mirroring the behavior can be part of it, right? So what I would say, the way we started at our company, this is the most like authentic, vulnerable place where people talk about their feelings all the time. I was like, ooh, there's a lot of feelings even for a feeler. Like, we said it from the beginning. So to your point, our CEO talks about that, right? Our CEO talks about, oh gosh, I don't necessarily like, he built Flickr, sold it to Yahoo, that was a success. But Slack became such a bigger success so much more quickly. He talked about like, ooh, I don't have all the answers. I don't know, right? He talked about as a founder, for those of you that work with founders or CEOs, they're the most isolated and lonely group. He started talking about that. He started talking about how he missed knowing when everybody was like 50 people in the company and he knew all the people, to like, I don't even know who these people are anymore. Right? So one is, I would say, it starts with modeling, starts from the top. It starts with the values that you have in your culture and how you build those into it. We've done that from the beginning. And quite frankly, some people are just not going to meet you there, and that's okay. Right? I think it can be our opportunity to create a container for people if they want to step into it. It is not our job to shove them into that container. I said, feel more, do it. Right? And sometimes people will exhibit, just like we were talking this morning, like some of that bullying behavior or micromanagement behavior, and you can make yourself vulnerable, you can share that, and they're just not going to have that level of self-awareness to meet you in that spot. So one is, I would say, it's not your job to transform the whole world. I say there is an opportunity to create that space and container for people.
So with that too, I work at a company that's totally remote, and we've found that it's really hard sometimes for our team members who aren't as comfortable to talk about their feelings to actually talk about it, but they'll write about it. And so we've created this space where if they want to have some of those conversations, we'll actually have them on Slack or something else like that, so we can do it in real time. But then they don't actually have to verbalize, like say it out loud, but they can express it in a different way.
Yeah, multiple avenues. You remind me as well, like when we talk about remote, because it's really important for me to give you like practical tips as well here today. So we have so many people on Zoom a lot of the time, and how hard it is to get a word in sometimes on Zoom, or, oh, isn't that so funny, that joke that I have no idea what the heck that person is talking about, right? Or please unwrap your burrito right next to the telephone situation. So one of the things that we've done, because Slack and emojis are a big deal, whatever might be right for your company, but we had just printed out some cheap emojis on popsicle sticks, and then the TV screens would raise up, right? So if it was like thumbs up, thumbs down, or like, hey, I want to talk, whatever the case may be, or like, haha, that's funny, or what, WTF, what are you talking about, right? So just some and it made it a little bit playful, so people could participate, and it took away the politeness around interrupting somebody in a Zoom call as well. So that's one thing that we did. The other thing we started doing is like on our televisions and our conference rooms, before we go into a meeting, we have like just the rules of what is a good meeting, right? Pretty basic, but it's kind of like if you see it enough times, it gets into your DNA. Yeah. Anybody else have anything else for remote workers that you're doing that you feel is really spectacular? Oh, what, here and then here.
Hi, I'm Aruna. This is actually not at our company, but I heard a great share from the last event I was at, and this team, they were remote globally, and they were finding that they would forget that someone was actually part of the meeting. So what they started doing was they actually printed a picture of him and then posted it on a stick and then put it there. It's like, oh yeah, there's George, right? He's there. So that helped actually remind that he was part of the meeting. I thought that was pretty cool.
To build on that, sometimes we leave an empty chair, just like feel that layer in the room, and always turn on the video chat so you can see them. And always, like, if we have a question, go through the virtual participants first, because sometimes when you're co-located, you're just too excited in the conversation, or you have side conversation. So we try to include everyone and go through the virtual participants first.
Yeah, starting with your Zoom attendees is a nice way to do that.
So my team's fully remote, and we're small. We're about 8 people, but we'll do a meeting after the meeting because we don't get that like coffee talk or like after a client meeting or anything that's externally facing. And so we do like a 5-minute Slack call because it's really easy just to click the button and hop back on with just a smaller group from that larger group. So that's worked.
When we have a meeting that needs to be interactive, we ask everyone to be at their own computer on Zoom rather than a lot of people in one room and then all these other remote folks who get very easily forgotten or don't, the large room will put themselves on mute and start talking about other things. So just asking everyone to be on their own computer even if they're at the same location.
Yeah, we are a remote team, and we also happen to coach people how to go remote. So I can share you a lot of tips, but the main tips that we see really useful in our team, we coach every new employee, please over-communicate. Because we don't see each other in the office, and I don't see you nodding, and I don't see you agreeing, and don't be polite, over-communicate. Express yourself with text in Slack. And it's kind of a shift people who used to work in the office supposed to do to move remote.
One thing that we do, because we are a hybrid remote in some offices, and there's some meetings where everyone except for a few people are in person. And so we ask that whoever is the meeting owner, so driving the meeting, to be conscious of who is speaking or not speaking, and ask everyone in the room to be like, actually pause, let's ask, do any of our remote attendees have something to say, to open up the floor to them.
We actually started, some of our teams, we don't do this as a company, but some of our teams have like a little, like a hotel lobby kind of bell. And if someone's maybe gone on a little bit too long or they're missing someone, they'll be like, bing, right? And it's a playful way. They've all gained agreement before it started, so no one has to feel shame around it. But it's just kind of like, okay, like, let's move on to the next person, or let's make sure all the voices in the room are heard. The other thing that we hear a lot is for the folks that are distributed, they don't always put on their video camera, right? Can be self-conscious to like look at yourself on video. So one is just setting that as the standard of like making sure that it is on. And someone taught me this, so let me pass this forward if you didn't know. Zoom now has a beauty filter, so if you're caught up, yes, if you're caught up on what you look like on the film, you can put on a beauty filter and just get over yourself. Yep.
Sometimes remote workers can feel self-conscious of their work environment if it's messy, so green screens.
That's a great point. So Jocelyn also said sometimes remote workers can feel self-conscious of their backgrounds, right? And so there's also the option for green screen background. So sometimes we play around that. It's like, oh, I'm in Hawaii, oh, I'm on a roller coaster, whatever the case may be. But even just making it a little bit playful to kind of take the stress out of it is also an option. Okay, we're almost out of time, so I want to just hit this, and I'll hit it lightly. This is a whole other section, but I'm here to tell you if your company truly, truly cares about diversity and belonging, We have not even talked about what it might be for folks that are not part of the majority or homogenous community. If you think that you're isolated at work, what might it be to be part of a minority in a group? For those of you that run engagement surveys, and how many of you run engagement surveys, right? How many of you are cutting the data by different URM groups? Some of them, right? I will tell you, and I've done some research on this, expect to see 5 to 10% lower from those populations, even though you might be providing quote unquote the same experience to everyone in the company. So this is something that's a much deeper topic, but I want to just make sure that it is stated. Things like ERGs, community building, what that looks like, those are some ways to go about that. Tactically, how we do that at Slack, again, surface level, is we do have 5 ERGs and we have many, many affinity groups. They all have their own private Slack channels and ability and opportunity to build community that has nothing to do with the HR or the people team. Okay, now before you run out of here, I want to just make sure you can also have one last exercise here, which is what does empathy look like? So you can leave if you want, but if you're getting something out of this and a little bit of aha, I encourage you to stay, do steps 1 through 4, and maybe just find somebody in the room to digest that with, okay? So what does empathy look like? 1 through 4. And then we'll come back together. And we have 5 minutes before the official end of the session.
That's okay. You want 2? Yes, please. There's another gentleman over there as well. You got it. Thank you so much. Welcome.
And if you want to start talking with your neighbor about it, start to process, feel free. Okay, so as we come back together in the final minute, I see people, I always tell like a good conversation is how much hand gesture, how much hand movements are. There's a lot of hand talking that's happening in this room right now. People are on the floor, people are gesticulating, there's a lot going on. So anything that anyone feels empowered or compelled by to share with the group as a result of that last? Stefan.
Something that we were talking about is like we jumped to like question 3 and 4 there, like how do you like the person to show up for you? And for me, I just want to know that they care, and so I don't really. It's like whatever they. I just want them to ask me like, how do you want me to show up? And then in that moment, I'll figure out what that is. But whatever it is in that moment is what I want. I think that's what came up for me.
Just even asking that question, what that unlocks. Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah.
We talked a little bit about how, like, what came up for me was sometimes when you share something vulnerable and it doesn't land for someone, you extrapolate that to everybody and you're like, oh my God, nobody's gonna ever understand me. So then you kind of like take that thing and you pack it away and you're like, nope, never sharing that again. So just kind of reminding yourself that even if like the first person that you talk to doesn't like get it, there will be other people who do get it, hopefully.
Being courageous is so much of how I want to show up as being a human. Yeah. Anyone else?
If someone is vulnerable with me, especially if it's a first time, I like to thank them for being vulnerable with me, and then follow up with like, how can I support you, or what do you need from me?
So it's just acknowledging the courage and the bravery to be vulnerable in the first place.
Yeah, as someone who has like often, what's the word? Sort of introverted tendencies. Sometimes I'm just being aware that like expressing and articulating, being explicit of like what I'm feeling or thinking, is, something I need to practice, right? But also, I guess, not overly expecting a particular type of expression from the other person and somehow judging them for that or making the situation worse than it actually is, So that's what I got out of this.
Reminds me of this morning, right? Fitting in is the opposite of belonging. Yeah. So with that, I want to wish you the rest of a very good day. I hope that you got something out of it. And remember, you have the opportunity to create the container. The rest is up to everyone else. Have a great day.